Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Neil Haley Show. Another great show today. Going to go to my website, toldtutor.net, for more information. Twitter, Told Tutor, Neil S. Haley, Facebook, LinkedIn, Neil Haley, Instagram, Told Tutor, Pinterest, Neil Haley, and Google Plus, Neil Haley. And I always like interviewing celebrities, and it's interesting his stories. He has a lot of tremendous stories, and I might be lucky enough to have him on for the entire half hour today. So I'm excited to welcome the program author and musician and radio host, author of Painted Black, Greg Kihn. Greg, thanks for calling. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. How's yourself?
I'm doing fantastic, Greg. So, did you ever think you'd write a book? I mean, all the different things, a Hall of Famer that you are, inductee of Bay Area, and all these different things. Did you ever think that you'd write a book?
Yeah, I've always been a writer, and even going back to junior high school, I remember having notebooks with stories in them and all kinds of weird stuff. So I guess in a way, I've always been a writer. It just hasn't been on the professional level just in the last 10 years. But yeah, I've always been a writer. I love writing.
So, tell me how you got into the music business. How did it start?
This is a good story because it encompasses all the various things in my life. But I was the morning show host for KFOX Radio in San Francisco for 17 years, and every morning, they'd have a couple of guys for me to interview. And one morning, I got to do Ringo Starr.
Oh, wow.
And I asked Ringo, he was getting ready to do one of his all-star Ringo tours. And I said, hey, Ringo, where did the Beatles get their music? You guys didn't have radio stations. You couldn't find, there wasn't import shops. So how did you find your music? I said, it was really hard, like, songs like Chains and Boys and stuff like that. And he said, Ringo said, we got them from people that were merchant marines that were returning from America, and they used to bring the latest records.
Right. Okay.
And I said, that's brilliant. And I thought, and that was the inspiration that had my guy Dustbin Bob. He was the inspiration for Dustbin Bob. Dustbin Bob was a guy that owned a little stand in the penny market, and he would sell the 45s that he used to get from the American merchant marines. And I asked Sir Paul the exact same question. He gave me the exact same answer. It was guys like he knew this guy, he knew that guy, and they were all, hardcore R&B fans. And that's where the actual Beatles got their covers,
Wow.
their cover numbers. And it put them light years ahead of a lot of the other bands that were still operating on the Merseyside scene.
Interesting, Greg. So basically, what happened was once you interviewed, you said, this is something I want to do, right? It sounds like.
Yeah. And once that individual, that character started to form in my mind, it was easy to add more things to his resume, because really, they had to get their records from somewhere, and probably would have been a friend of them that, would like let them borrow the records and stuff. So, yeah, it made a lot of sense, and it was a true story. True stories are always better than made up ones, don't you think?
But as a radio personality, you always told the truth, right, Greg?
Always, always.
Always told the truth, for sure. And so basically, Greg, who would you say were the most amazing people you interviewed in your career? You already mentioned one, fantastic, but yeah,
that's a good question. Because in your career, there's always going to be a couple of stinkers. Like, it's easy to say, like, who was the worst guy you did an interview with? I would say you know, some of the guys I thought that were most that were spokesmen were guys that had had a tough time, but they didn't care. You know, guys like Jimmy Page was a fascinating interview because he didn't care. Yeah, he didn't care that he was sleeping with a 14-year-old girl and worshiping the devil and all this other stuff. He didn't care.
So what was your response as the host when you're interviewing him? Were you like, "Oh my gosh," in your brain saying, "I can't believe he's just saying this"?
I actually asked him, and I had like major cojones for doing this. But in the middle of the interview, I go, "So Jimmy, is it true you guys were like, worshiping the devil and doing underage girls?" And he goes, "Yeah, it was."
Did he feel upset he ever just said that in the interview, or
no, he was proud of it.
Oh my gosh!
So now you look back on their on their legacy, and it's just another one of the many unusual legacies that they have left us. But hey, come on, look, rock and roll.
Yes.
Everybody's got the same three chords. It's what you do with them.
Right. It's how you market them, the look, the feel, the whole thing in rock and roll that leads to success and having the right team together and right place, right time.
Yeah.
Did you so let's go into something interesting. Did you ever interview Motley Crue? Did you ever get the chance to interview them?
Motley Crue? No, but I did spend an evening drinking with them in a bar.
Is that in the book?
I didn't actually interview them, but you know, I remember we were playing in L.A. and we were down at the what was the name of that place? I think it was Barney's. It was like a rock and roll bar kind of hangout, and the Romantics were there. And I've always been I like the Romantics, you know, the red leather suits, the whole thing. And I was talking to him. The guy that was in charge of the bar thought they were a gay biker gang. He says, "I'm going to throw these gay biker guys out. I don't want them in here." And, good that they were going, "We're not gay. We're not bikers. We're just a rock and roll band." But it didn't work.
So interesting. In the book Painted Black is we got the story and say, all the different things. It features iconic personalities like John Lennon, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Jimi Hendrix, and much, much more. Did you get an opportunity? So you definitely did interview Jimmy then, right?
Jimi Hendrix?
Yes.
No, I never got to do Jimi Hendrix, although I did talk to Noel Redding, who was real good friends with Jimi Hendrix. Shortly after Hendrix died, Noel Redding did a series of interviews, and it was very, he told that story, for instance, about being backstage at the Monterey Pop Festival, and they had a big fight who was going to go in first, The Who or Hendrix, because they were going to, smash their guitars and stuff. And Bustin' Bob, by the way, who just happened to be there, says, "Hey, let's flip a coin." And they flipped the coin, and of course, Hendrix won the coin toss. And that's all she wrote, man. He was a legend after that concert.
And then part of the book is about the Rolling Stones. Explain that, especially the Stones. Yeah.
I had written the first book, basically about the Beatles. And if you were a friend of the Beatles in the early days, and how that would be, especially going through all the Beatlemania, and then later on when they were having threats on their lives, the Stones is a completely different place. I mean, they had death threats everywhere they went. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They were constantly on the paw, and I think that was the fact that the Stones just didn't seem to give a hoot. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Hey, we're going to play here. Go ahead, shoot us, see if we care. And they just had it. and that I loved. You know, Keith Richards was my idol growing up because Keith was the guy, right? And I was very fortunate that usually you only have one Keith Richards in your band.
Right.
And I had four guys, four Keith Richards. I was expected to be the straight man, you know?
Well, it's amazing, Greg. I wish we had more time. We're definitely going to have to stay in touch, maybe connect via social media and stuff, Greg. But where's the best place we can find information on you and learn more about you? Where can we go?
GregKinn.com. It all begins and ends with GregKinn.com. And I got a lot of stuff going on right now. You know, this new novel is out, and I've already finished the next novel at that, and we're putting together a Greg Kinn documentary. That should be exciting. So next couple of months are going to be pretty exciting for me.
Well, definitely, and we'll have to stay in touch and let me know when those things happen, because I can tell you your documentary would be fascinating, especially just as the musician and also the talk show host and radio guy. And interesting.
God, yeah.
I mean, I'll have to connect with you and ask you some questions and have you back on for a longer interview, because you were a fantastic guy. Best of luck, and I hope everyone picks up the book and learns more about you. So good talking to you, Greg.
Hey, thanks a ton, you guys, and I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Greg. Take care now.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, you're watching The Neil Haley Show and listening to The Total Celebrity Show. When we get back, another great guest, TotalTutor.net, hashtag Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Jim Corns, and this is John Bauer, and we're paramedics with Tri-Community South EMS.
This year, EMS Week is May 17th through May 23rd. Tri-Community South EMS would like to use this week to start our campaign on distracted driving.
Distracted driving has been called an epidemic. Unfortunately, many of us drive distracted. So what is distracted driving?
It is driving while engaged in any activity that could divert a person's attention away from the prime task of driving.
Texting, making phone calls, putting on makeup, reaching for objects, changing the CD or radio channel is part of an endless list that put us at risk. The following statistics should make each of us think about making changes in the way we drive or ride in a car. In 2012, over 3,000 people were killed and 421,000 were injured as a result of distracted driving.
In 2011, it was estimated that a typical daylight moment, at least 660,000 cars were being driven by drivers using handheld cell phones.
40% of teenagers have been in a car with a person using a cell phone while driving in a way that put others in danger. Driving while using a cell phone reduces the amount of brain activity devoted to driving by 37%.
Change the way you drive. Speak up for your safety.
Drive without texting or talking on your cell phone. Make calls or texts prior to driving. Pull over to a safe location to text or check emails. Stop texting or talking on cell phones to others that are driving. It all starts with you.
In honor of EMS Week, Tri-Community South would like to thank and recognize our staff for the work they do in keeping our community safe. For more information on Tri-Community South EMS, our CPR classes, or our Speakers Bureau, visit tcsems.org.
We're back to the Neil Haley Show and a fantastic interview with Greg Kinn. The rock and roll personality, all the stories. I tell you, you definitely have to check him out. But I'm excited about this next guest because it comes back to the whole situation of the dangers of the internet. As a dad of 5 children and knowing the dangers of internet and understanding specifically what could happen, especially when we allow our kids online and the dangers. Well, Rod might have the answer, and I think he does, so I'm excited to welcome the program Rod DeSilva from Web Curfew. Rod, thanks for calling. How are you?
I'm very well, Neil. Thank you for having me on today.
Fantastic. So tell me how you came up with this product. What was the idea? I think hearing some of the things I just said is one of your major concerns for sure of thinking about doing something like this.
Well, absolutely. I think I came about it like every other parent's realizing that there's an issue here. About 6 years ago, I walked into my 14-year-old son's bedroom at about 11:30 just to check on him. Hopefully it's a school night. He should have been asleep. And I found him up on the internet on his laptop. And as I walked in, he guiltily shut the cover of his laptop. Clearly was doing something he didn't want me to see. And I remember having the realization right then and there, 2 things pop in my head. Number one is that this is an experience that virtually every parent of an internet-age child is having at some point, at least once. And the second thing was, rather than be angry with him, I was sort of angry with myself because I realized I'd lost control of a serious situation and I had to do something about it. So right then and there, I decided, I'm a tech guy, I write software for a living, and I decided to take a look at this problem in a little more detail and came up with Web Curfew as a result.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's huge because, again, the concerns we have, the dangers of what can happen online, who you meet online, the dangers of getting abducted to the wrong information, all those things. So tell us about this product now, for sure.
Yeah, it's an internet parental control service, and I came about it a completely different way than what was happening at the time. At the time, the general advice, and shortly after that event happened, my wife and I went to the local school where our kids were going to hear a talk from the police on internet safety. And we came away very underwhelmed. They were basically saying, have your kids use the common PC in the den, keep an eye on what they're doing, and make sure you have the talk and they don't give out personal information, all with respect to what you're talking about there and the dangers of the internet. And my wife turned to me, I remember when we drive home in the car, and she said, well, you're a propeller head. Can you do something about this? And I took that as a sort of challenge, and I immediately went home and I looked at my router. Everyone's got a router in their house, right? And there's that black box that you kind of, as long as it works, you don't touch it, and out in the world's well. Turns out that that's a pretty powerful machine. It's got a computer in it, and it can do some pretty amazing things. The problem is mere mortals don't know how to program it or do anything with it. So what I decided to do is create a website called Web Curfew, and it's not a software download. It's not an app.
Good,
so it's just
great.
a website. You walk up to it, and you tell me the make and the model of the router you have in your house. And if it's of one of the about 115 that I now support, and we're supporting new ones all the time, I can then show you all of the devices right there on that web page that are connected to your router, and you can turn them off with respect to internet access right there. So we don't touch the devices themselves. What we're doing is we're actually programming your router to turn off access to those devices. So it's like going at the single choke point in the house. So parents don't have to deal with 101 devices that their kids know more about than they do. And there's just more and more coming all the time. So that device-centric parental controls is a sort of a broken and antiquated model. We're going at the router as a different approach, a cloud-based approach.
So what it does is turn it off at certain times of night so they can't turn it back on. Is that correct?
That's right. It's a completely free service. And what you can do, basically, it's putting a light switch with respect to internet activity on all of your internet-enabled devices. It doesn't touch the device, it doesn't turn off the device itself. It just makes it so the device can't get out on the internet through your Wi-Fi.
So it shuts down the Wi-Fi at a certain time. That's very good. So if you're not in the home and you can't, so you recommend, Rod, as a parent, to constantly always be monitoring your kids if you're in the house, especially with their devices. Then it sounds like to me.
Well, I'm not quite saying that. What I'm recommending is, and I've learned, so we stood this thing up. It's been running now for a couple of years. We've had wonderful response. What blew me away was it's all over the world. I've had 176 different countries visit the site. And what I found, and we do offer content filtering, the ability to block unwanted content, such as pornography or gambling or violence or whatever you like. But we found that, and while that's really important for very young children,
That's a huge,
as the
yeah.
kids get older, the parents seem more interested in controlling the amount of shared time that the kids are spending online. And that's where setting up responsible boundaries. I mean, you have every responsible parent has a physical curfew of when their kids should be home, under the roof. So we don't let our kids raise themselves in the streets. Why we let them raise themselves online. So it's about having a curfew, if you will, to say, not right now. Enough's enough. Go read a book. The internet's off right now.
Definitely. It's quite interesting when you talk about the internet's off right now. So where our listeners and our viewers are trying to figure out, and I'm trying to understand, is basically the product shuts down the Wi-Fi at times when you don't want them to use it. So if, let's say, for example, it's a homework time, Rod, time to utilize the service, right? So that they're going upstairs and you know that they're going to study in their room because that's the quietest place in the house. You go ahead and make sure that you can hit that switch and shut down the Wi-Fi so that they can stay focused on what they're doing. So they're not Skyping with friends and being distracted with when they're doing their homework, correct?
Correct. That's certainly one scenario, although the modern home's getting a little more sophisticated and complicated because a lot of these kids are coming home with homework that's assigned with internet research. So how do you handle that situation, right?
You
want the
have
internet
to have
there,
the conversation.
you do,
for sure, yeah.
Yeah, you do want to shut down the distractions. So where we do that is that's a combination of web content filtering to be able to say, okay, 24/7, we're going to block, like in my personal home, we don't allow pornography in the house 24/7. I just don't think it's something that should be on on my home internet. So that's shut off all the time. We check the category pornography, and that's no longer reachable literally by any device, including parents' devices in the home. And yet at 6 o'clock at night on a school night, I have the ability now to go in and put a different policy, which includes pornography and Facebook, Xbox, and YouTube. Shut those down as well. We call that homework time, no distractions. And so that's on for an hour and a half every night, school night. And then what we do is we open back up the Facebook, because my daughter likes to use that for 45 minutes around 7:30 at night. And then the entire internet shuts off for all those devices around 9 o'clock, and that gives them about half an hour to read a book before going to sleep. So that would be a typical, a policy, if you will, that happens in our house. And our service is set up so it's absolutely free, as long as you're willing to log in every night and turn off Bobby's iPad at 7:30, and then log back in at 8:30 and turn off his big sister Mary's PC because she gets a little bit of extra time. She's older. And then remember to log back in the morning and turn it all back on again. It's free. And perpetually so. You can use it forever for free. What we charge for is about $5 a month. Okay, we charge to let you set up it all on timer, so it's all automated. So it's instead of treating it like a punishment, or I'm going to turn you off now, it's more consistent every day, day in and day out. That's just the norm, and the kids quickly fall into that in the same way they've fallen into their physical curfews without moaning and groaning about it.
So what's interesting, Rod, as you're saying, is that each individual device can be shut down, meaning the access to it. How are you able to do that? So you have iPads, you have iPhones, you have different smart devices, you have all these different things. How do you make sure that you can pick and choose? So you still can go on the internet later at night, Rod. You're not stuck that the internet shut down for you at 9 o'clock, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you went up to your router and you pulled the plug on it, everybody would lose their internet, right?
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
And there are parents doing that every night. They're taking the power plug to the router to bed with them. That's how serious this is a problem in their house, and they're just at their wits' end. But what we're doing is we're saying, no, your router decides what devices can get internet and what devices can't. That's its whole purpose. And what we're saying is every router has the capability of blocking devices from accessing the internet. These things are called IP-based filters or MAC-based filters. But unless you know what an IP address is, a MAC address, unless you're comfortable with these IT pro terms, you aren't venturing into your router to do all this. And so all our service has done is said, all right, if all these routers are out there that can do this, let's put a very parent-friendly abstraction over top of it, and we write the software drivers to talk to those individual routers. We support, as I said, about 115 today, and we're adding more and more all the time. And so that's our investment in effort in terms of what our service does. But with respect to what the parent's user experience is, it's just a simple website that lists all of the devices. Where does it get the list of devices? Well, it asks your router because your router knows. and it puts them all on the screen and gives you a big button beside each one, and you just poke it and it turns from green to red, and you know they're off the internet because we've programmed the router to say that device can't get on the internet. So that's technically how it works. But again, any good technology kind of gets the technology out of the way and puts the user interface on it, right?
And also, Rod, when you talk about the technology portion of it, that the blocking certain sites and stuff, that can be blocked based on individuals as well, correct? Certain people's devices.
No, I don't mean to give that that suggestion. The web content filtering, because we do it from the cloud. It's a little technical. It's called DNS, Domain Name Service. But essentially, what happens when you type in a Google.com into your browser, you don't actually go to Google. You go to a domain name service to change Google.com into an IP address. It's kind of like a phone book lookup. Right. Look up the phone number, and then you go to Google. So what we do is we've implemented our own DNS service, and our web curfew can point your router to our DNS service. And so when you type in, Google.com, you'll come to us,
right.
And we have the ability to turn that into the phone number and send you on your way. But in addition, we have a filtering capability, and we'll say, okay, did this household block search engine categories? And if the answer is yes, then we won't send you on your way, and we'll redirect you to a block page. So it works for the entire house because your router is a single public address on the internet, and everybody behind your router, it looks like it's coming from the same destination. So we don't have the ability to do that at the device level. It's more of an entire home policy that we're talking about here. But still, it's very effective in blocking unwanted content. And combined with the timers, you can still turn back on that content for, say, adults at 9 o'clock when all the kids are in bed and their devices are off anyways.
All right, perfect, Rob. Where's the best place we can find information on you and learn more about you? Where can we go?
Webcurfew.com.
All right, Rob. Rod, good talking to you, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Bye now.
All right, that was the Neil Haley Show. Again, go to my website, tolltutor.net for more information. Twitter, Toll Tutor, Neil S. Haley, Facebook, LinkedIn, Neil Haley, Instagram, Toll Tutor, Pinterest, Neil Haley, and Google+, Neil Haley. And that's all the places you can go, and especially in hashtag Neil Haley Show for live tweeting, especially if you're watching the show or listening to the show. Great guests continue as I'm going to be recording again for 4 hours today. So I'm halfway through, some more fun to go, and take care, guys, and we'll talk next week. Good day, everyone.
From a very young age, I was exposed to sports in a great way. My uncle was on the first pro basketball team in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Ironmen. And my dad, of course, that was my hero. He was a basketball referee for over 30 years. Just been a passion in my life. And as I got older, I found out about horses, and I ended up owning a stable. And I was asked to be on a sports show with Roger Houston called the Meadows Racing Network. And when we were done, I said, boy, that'd be something great. Maybe someday I could have a TV show. Back in 2011, I had a conversation with some friends about sports that piqued my interest in how could we start a sports talk show on TV. Well, I found out I could go to public access TV in Bethel Park and I'd be able to produce my own sports talk TV show. The great thing about doing 2 sports talk shows on BPTV is I can share my passion about sports with thousands of people every week. If you are passionate about something that you would like to share with the community, I encourage you to come to BPTV and produce a show like I do. I'm Al Levine, volunteer producer of Pittsburgh Sportsline on BPTV.